Babylon 5 is one of the pillars of space opera genre, along with Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica. Alas, now people rarely remember it. The history of the space station is lost among the other great sci-fi series like Star Trek, the cult Firefly, and in recent years, The Expanse. It may seem that Babylon 5 has only historical value, however, this is wrong. Poor graphic and costume design make Straczynski's work technically outdated, but thanks to the plot, characters, and the universe, it easily competes with modern-day series. Today, we will tell you why Babylon 5 was unique and why you need to watch it nowadays.
The whole series was created by one person, Joseph Michael Straczynski, who made the Babylon 5 space station his police station. According to the plot, in the middle of the 23rd century, it was built by a single state of people called the Earth Alliance, as a center of galactic diplomacy. Station was a center of negotiation between representatives of all civilizations that control space in this version of future. When people started to explore space outside solar system, they encounter with other sentinel life forms. After a long history of acquaintance and conflicts, fragile peace restores among the galaxy, concentrated in one place, Babylon 5. There were four main players: the Earth itself, the decadent but still powerful Centauri Empire, the warlike Narn, which had recently achieved independence from Centauri, and Minbari, a spiritual and usually peace-loving civilization, which, however, shortly before almost destroyed humanity during the war. The ambassadors of these peoples, as well as the station officers, became the main characters. Also, other species were united in the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, as well as the mysterious Warlords, the most technologically advanced and powerful race, who played the role of a Deus Ex Machina in the first half of the series. The whole story was built around the relationships and political struggle between individual characters and their countries. Constant rivalry between Metropole, Centauri Empire, and its former colony Narn, when Centauri denied the evolved Narn's independence. Bitter victory of Earth against Minbari, when Earth was able to destroy only one Minbari's spaceship during the whole conflict. Those relationships result in a number of global conflicts: a civil war on Earth and among the Minbari, a second conflict between the Centauri and the Narn, and the confrontation between all sentient races and the mysterious shadows. Michael Straczynski is a screenwriter who has worked on many films, TV series, and comic books. At the turn of the 80s and 90s, Straczynski dreamed of resolving what he thought as the main problem of the science fiction series of that era: the lack of long-term planning. It is clear that these complaints primarily addressed to the series Star Trek The Next Generation, which has been released in those years. Straczynski's creation was in many ways a polemic against the concept of Gene Roddenberry and his followers. He believed that writers and directors, forced to work episode by episode, could not create a truly big, complex, and at the same time consistent story. Instead of making a series where the characters explored a new planet or new anomaly in each episode, Straczynski decided to create an epic canvas that focused on the tragic between characters and states. He was inspired primarily by literature: Asimov's Foundation series, Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, Herbert's Dune, and other large-scale epos. The creator of Babylon relied more on the ideas of story concentrated in one location than on science fiction works. This concept became popular in the 80s, thanks to TV series about hospital, police stations, and war offices. By the way, when Roddenberry created the original Star Trek in the 60s, his source of inspiration was also TV series about cops. This is noticeable, for example, in the constant bickering of the main characters, reminiscent of arguments between partners. But times have changed, as well as police dramas and series based on it. It's pretty obvious that the structure of the Babylon 5 universe was borrowed almost unchanged by BioWare's writers for the Mass Effect games, which, oddly enough, did not increase popularity to the show. But Straczynski's merit lies not in the ability to invent unique worlds, but in very long-term planning. The market situation, ratings, and producers of course had influence, but all 5 seasons of the series are merging into a single narrative. 10 years before The Wire, often named as a breakthrough in story complexity, Straczynski effectively created a new series format in the lightweight space opera genre. But this format won wide recognition only years later. The main feature of Babylon 5 is its attention to character development and an unprecedented by standard of those times willingness to change the roles of the heroes. Even in series that present surprises at the plot level, most characters remain constant due to the original image until the end. But in Babylon 5, the plot is secondary to the personal stories. A striking example of this is the path of Wanda Malari, ambassador of the Centauri Empire. Appearing on screen as a comic character, he gradually develops into one of the central figures, then makes perhaps the most monstrous decision in the entire series, and then lives with its consequences, never receiving final forgiveness and atonement for his sins. His rival and sometimes friend is Jakar, Narn ambassador, who was a fearsome warrior, fought with Centauri for independence of his own people, and evolved into spiritual guru, ascended into the ranks of Saint Martyrs. Malari and Jakar are just 2 examples. In fact, all the characters in Babylon 5 and the series completely different from who they started. At the same time, it is clear that Babylon 5 seems to be stuck between different eras of sci-fi. The dialogues are too straightforward, many of the aliens are introduced purely for the sake of jokes, main characters and a number of their assistants are the classic good guys, the faithful heirs of Captain Kirk. But against this, backdrop stories of betrayal, genocide and drug addiction, complex personal conflicts and political intrigues are unfolding. Moreover, all this is united by a cross-cutting plot, unpredictable to the viewer. Straczynski quite early makes it clear that he is ready to seriously change not only the characters, but also the entire fictional universe for the sake of the story. The combination of naive and grim realism works surprisingly well, helping the series avoid going to both extreme sides. Instead of obsessively convincing the viewer that all people are bastards, or, on the contrary, teaching him to get through simple and understandable conflicts, Babylon 5 focuses on individual events. Straczynski's characters do not embody any specific ideas, like the desire for the unknown, the superiority of logic over emotion, kindness, or mercy. Instead, the authors of the series try to show how situational decisions that seem to be good or logical in the end push the characters to increasingly dubious actions. As a result, a person's, even those in the power, especially those with the power, lose control over their own lives. At the same time, characters never stop changing, do not simply transform from hero to villain or vice versa.
However, the plasticity of characters does not mean that Babylon 5 does not have its own ideology. Straczynski had a fairly clear idea of which actions in the world were good and which were evil, even though all heroes managed to commit both throughout the series, and here you can notice both numerous differences and similarities between Babylon 5 and modern-day series. Overall, Straczynski remained faithfully to the humanistic ideals inherited from the classic American sci-fi. Peace is better than war, freedom is better than submission, tolerance and inclusiveness is better than uniformity and chauvinism. Of course, many things are perceived differently now than when the series was released. Having a black doctor and a female ambassador among the main characters may no longer seem like a political statement, but in their time, these characters and associated plots appeared quite progressive. But unexpectedly bold in modern realities is the character of Officer Susan Ivanova, a Russian Jew senior assistant to the station commander. Like Chekhov, from the Star Trek, this hero is a tribute to the optimism of science fiction writers who believe that in the future the United States and Russia would find a common language. As other countries draw America's attention in the 90s, characters with Russian root appeared fewer and fewer, and then the geopolitical and military confrontation returned, the optimism diminished, and Russians now can more often be seen in the role of villains. However, show does not pay much attention to modern topics. Straczynski was much more interested in the problem of power. In series, he also remained faithfully to the ideas established in American culture that power is corrupt and more of it worse. All heroes who strive to control others are forced to pay a high price for it, and characters who renounce power and prefer the role of spiritual gurus and healers get approval. Moreover, that applies to both individual heroes and entire alien races. The very condemnation of power ambitions is not new, but Babylon 5 is distinguished by the consistency with which this idea is carried out. Kirk from Star Trek and Mel Reynolds from Firefly are eternal rebels whom no one offers to rule, but in Babylon 5, the authors consider many options for gaining power and giving it up, leading to the conclusion that ambition is always destructive. Another important theme of Babylon 5 was religion. Straczynski readily introduced both earthly and alien religions into the series. Catholic orders operate on the station, each of the race's visitors have their own beliefs, which the characters willingly talk about.
On the night before our Lord was crucified, he spent the night alone in the Garden of Gethsemane. He did not have to be there when they arrived. He could have chosen to leave, to postpone the inevitable for a few hours or even days. He knew what would happen, but he chose to stay, to sacrifice himself, and thus atone for the sins of others. It's a very fragile human moment. And I've often thought about that night. And I honestly don't know if I would have had the courage to have stayed.
Religion is also reflected in the global plot. The prophecies of the Minibari priests serve as a key to resolving a number of conflicts, and one of the civilization even turns out to be an actual angels. And among the earthling characters there are religious people as well. Ivanova is a Jewish, and Dr. Franklin belongs to Straczynski fictional religion Foundationism, a doctrine that claims that all religions, even aliens, teach the same thing.
See, the idea is that God is too big to be defined by words. Sort of like Zeno's paradox. You can never really get anywhere because there's an infinite number of dots between you and the object. The closer you get to defining God, the further away it gets.
This is also a general idea for American science fiction, with its impenetrable belief that people can always agree and any conflicts are transient. In Babylon 5, that concept gets additional confirmation through the image of those very warlords, who actually turns out to be the sources of the truth hidden not only behind earthly, but also behind alien religious traditions. But how Babylon 5 is very different from other series in its attitude towards science and scientists. For earlier series, science was the answer to everything. Their creators happily bombarded viewers with meaningless terms and theories, often making scholars the main characters. In subsequent series, the idea that scientific knowledge will save the world faded into the background, but scientific approach became a requirement for the fictional worlds themselves. Even the space western Firefly, in the very first episode, indicates that its authors are attentive to the scientific knowledge, and remember, sound does not travel in space. Both The Expanse and most modern feature movies strive for the authenticity. And Babylon 5 was more of a space fantasy. It fits that definition even more than Star Wars. Babylon's main characters are military men, politicians and spirit guides, not scientists and researchers. That can be seen not only in the plot but also in the style of the series. Alien races similar to angels and demons, telepath religion cults, orders of knighthood, aliens posing as gods. All of this is given much more attention to space anomalies or methods of traveling faster than light. Even traditional fantastic time travel stories are needed to justify the establishment of prophecies and the motive of predestination. In the Babylon 5, there is generally a lot of mysticism, which receives only superficial scientific justification. All this, however, does not in a way change the strict consistency of the show.
Straczynski's concept did not become mainstream. One way or another, Babylon 5 remained an exception, and the genre turned in different direction. Perhaps the series served as a kind of intermediate link, although it could rather be called as a side branch of evolution. Partially, Straczynski's work was ahead of its time, partially it was outdated. The special effects that once appeared to be breakthroughs are bringing smile right now. Babylon 5 brought many ideas to world science fiction, but at the same time it was almost forgotten. The fate of the series is logical, in its own way. Bringing back Babylon 5 is an almost impossible task, precisely because of the very things that made the series unique. Let's say, Star Trek has always been more of an anthology of fantasy images. It easily changed characters, themes and plots in accordance with trends in science fiction and social tendencies. Biotechnology and conflicted, tormented heroes are all on the rage these days, and Star Trek Discovery does its best to fit in. And Babylon 5 is a complete work created by a specific person. Straczynski not only came up with the concept of the series, but also personally wrote the script for 92 of the 110 episodes, and maintained connections between them, according to a personally created plan. The world he invented was interesting in itself, and corresponded to the task, but it was created to a specific plot. Still, we need the Babylon 5. Although, you won't surprise anyone with a cross-cutting plot and many parallel lines, though such attention to the characters and the determination to change them remains rare. It seems to be inherent only to serious, dark realistic stories in the spirit of Breaking Bad. And Straczynski provided that the series can tell a story of a tragic fall or redemption while remaining entertaining and light. This is why Babylon 5 worth watching now, and to hope that someone will someday want to revive it. The cartoon Babylon 5 The Road Home, released last year, shows that opportunity still remains.